All right, it looks like we have a pretty good crowd together. That's excellent. So why don't we begin? 7 p.m. is pretty late in most people's days, so no reason to wait any longer. If anyone comes in late and they reach out to you via chat, if they don't reach me while I'm talking, let them know that this is being recorded. This is also for you to know this is being recorded for other people to use it later on. So first things first, I am the host and presenter for tonight, as you can clearly tell. My name is Professor Volker Janssen. That is a German name. And I'm Professor of History of California and US History here at the Department of History, Caltech Fullerton. I'm also the Vice Chair of the department. And I've been thinking a lot about the way that graduate students in the humanities and social sciences find their careers, and why this is a different story for H&SS graduate students than it is for people from other colleges. So that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. So tonight I want to first make you understand and appreciate what makes your degree, what makes the family of degrees in H&SS special and different from other colleges. And I think that's an important precondition for starting to work on your own career plans. And that will be the second seminar, and I'll be announcing and reminding you of the date for that at the end of tonight's event. First, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, because I think that helps explain why I think about careers for H&SS graduate students. I grew up in Germany. I finished high school there and did my national service, meaning the replacement service for what otherwise would be my military service. And then I was asked, everybody in my year back then went to university, and I was supposed to go to university as well. I did not want to. I wanted to do something else, something different, because it seemed like everybody was doing the best or the most difficult study plan that they qualified for. So if you had a very good degree, a very good graduate GPA in high school, you could go into law or medicine. And so everybody told me, I was a good student in high school. They said you should go into medicine or into law. I did not want to go into medicine or law. So I didn't go to university. I looked for a job overseas. First, I dabbled around, spent a year working for a company to make money, and I did comedy, stage comedy. So that didn't make a lot of money. It was fun though, maybe more for me than people who watched, but nonetheless. So I spent a year doing that, and then I found a job at a company in London because I wanted to learn good English. And so I spent a year working a very lowly job in a London office that did overseas engineering projects. And I really got into that work, and I got a pittance for a pay, but I worked 60 hours a week because I really just found it interesting. And then they sent me overseas for a year. So I went to Belize, and I lived in Belize City for a year and oversaw an engineering project there. And that project petered out at some point, and I was going to go and do something else. But the company then offered me another engineering project somewhere else and said, why don't you just keep doing this and just go overseas and do these? And they said, you could go to Tanzania. That would be our next site in Tanzania, Africa. Sounds exotic, sounds exciting. I said, okay, that sounds great. And I had some friends there in Belize who offered me some good advice. And I said, think about it. What do you want to do with your life? If this job was at home in your hometown in Germany, would you want to do it? I said, good God, no. No, that sounds completely boring. I would never want to do this if I had to do this in my hometown. And they said, this may not be your career for you then. So I quit that job and went to what I would originally always wanted to do, and that was journalism. I'd always been in love with journalism that I saw on TV back in the 80s and 70s when I was a kid. A foreign correspondence reporting from distant place. So I did an internship at a New York newspaper, a German language newspaper in New York City. And I did that for 3 months as an intern, then for another 9 months paid. Then the paper folded. And that's when I decided, okay, I think I need to go to college. I think I need to get some higher education. I was 24, 25 at the time, and decided right away that I also wanted to study abroad. And so eventually, for 3 years, I worked towards getting a Fulbright fellowship that got me to UCSD. Got my MA in history there first, which I thought I was going to take into journalism to become a foreign correspondent. That was my dream, travel the world, report from distant places. But then the internet happened and the whole journalism world started to look less and less attractive. And at the same time, history really sort of got my interest, and working in archives sounded really fantastic. So that's how I became a history professor. And in 2005, then I started this job and have been here ever since, very happily so. And you will see in a second why this matters for you. So the first thing I want to do here today is talk a little bit about our college and other colleges. So, and here you are welcome to switch off your mics and then speak out, or raise your hand and then speak out. That may be the better format. Colleges and programs, they all have certain expectations regarding career paths. So let's say the graduates from the College of Education, what do they think they will become? I'm asking you.
Teachers.
Right, teachers, right? Okay, so if you get a degree in education, you become teachers. What else might be in the cards for you?
Principals.
Yes, principals, right? In educational administration. Here on campus, we have a lot of people that get their PhD in education and then become assistant deans, associate deans, and all sorts of important positions that help education work. So, and that's pretty transparent, right? If you get a degree in education, you become a teacher or something related to the field of education, which is vast and wide. Graduates from health and human development work as, right? Jump in here.
HR?
Say again?
Like the HR department, human resources?
HR, okay, yes. Health, and what else in the health field?
Doctors.
Doctors or nurses, right? We have a fantastic nursing program, right? Dominic?
They work as library science or library assistants.
Library and human development? Let me look at your line. I think you may be on a different line there.
How about nurses?
Nurses in healthcare, right? They become healthcare professionals of all kinds, right? Graduates from the College of Communications, where do they work? What do they do?
Public relations.
Public relations, journalists. Here, actually, this was the idea that I would unveil step by step. Okay, now I've given everything away. In communications, they work as journalists, reporters, speech therapists, PR, all sorts of things. In engineering and computer science, well, presumably they will work as engineers, right? Or they will work with computers, they will be running IT departments, that sort of a thing. And graduates from the College of Business, they will work, well, in business. Huh? Okay, no, sorry, business, that's how it's said. And that all seems pretty straightforward. And that is the reason why any student that tells their family or parents, I'm going to get a degree in business, no one in that family is going to say, what are you going to do with that? Right? That's not going to happen. If you get a degree in education, no one's going to say, what are you planning here? What's your future there? Same in nursing or engineering. There's not going to be any doubt about your future plan. But graduates from the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, well, that's not so straightforward, is it? So what I would like you to do now for yourself is to write down the jobs that you think are most directly linked to this college. I'm going to give you a minute while I drink cold coffee. And check the chat box. All right. So has anybody come up with a job that is very clearly identified with the humanities and social sciences, where there's this direct path in the way that it is there for education or health or communications or engineering or business? Excellent. I'm hoping no one has anything, because that's kind of the teaching point that I have here, right? There is nothing quite as clearly connected to the humanities and social sciences. So, and I'm not talking about, say, BA level. If a student tells their parents, I'm going to major in philosophy or liberal arts or in history, the parents are more likely to say, what's your plan there? Where are you going to go with this? Now, H&SS is wide and far in its disciplines, and not all disciplines have the same level of issue. In psychology, for instance, a lot of people know very well what psychologists do, which is incidentally where this is by far the largest major and the largest department in the college. Criminal justice similarly attracts a lot of students because it seems fairly easy to imagine the kind of work that you would do with that degree. And no one's going to say, well, whatever did you have in mind with a psychology degree? Because it seems that at the very least, something like therapist is in the cards for you. But for a lot of other disciplines in the humanities and social sciences, that direct path does not exist. Now, we'll talk a little bit about why that is. And in a way, we can talk about the distinctions between, say, HSS disciplines and other disciplines. And I'm oversimplifying here. I'm most likely to offend the entire remainder of Cal State Fullerton when I say this, between a trade school model and a higher education model. So in a trade school model, we have a direct application of skills, right? So you go into your nursing program, you learn what nurses do, then you go and do what nurses do. There is often an immediate school employer pipeline. So at Mihailo, you go there because you hope that the professor works at a firm that is hiring, or you know of another collaboration between the business college and the direct employer. The same may be true for engineering. There's often a close match between the training and the job, meaning that you're going to go into the job and you're going to be prepared, similar to direct application, I guess, in terms of my argument, that you're not going to wonder what you're going to be doing once you've got your computer science degree. You're going to be working in that field. And that also often comes with direct expectations regarding pay and benefits. So people go into nursing because they know that nurses are generally well paid, and there's certainly a high demand for them. So you feel like there's a certain job security there. And for those that are unionized, the benefits are also pretty good. The same is true for teachers. So all of that spells out that you go and get educated for the job you want to do. That is job training. That's what a trade school does. And without dismissing the quality of education that our nurses are getting or our engineers, in terms of the educational model, it is comparable, say, to a school that trains a cook very well, or a car mechanic very well. You get the skills you need for the job. Now, and again, you need to bear in mind that I'm dramatizing the contrast here and that I'm doing some injustice to these colleges, but I'm trying to make a principal point about HSS. I'm realizing that this is being recorded, and I wouldn't like to think, I wouldn't like the nurses faculty to think that I'm dismissing their work. It is valuable work. I can't think of anything more important, especially after these past 2 years. And higher education, it's a little different. So this is not directly geared towards industry or employment field. There is no clear connection between, say, a major in liberal studies and a job. We don't have a direct school to career pipeline for historians. There's no major company that's hiring hundreds of historians every year, and that's where our students will go. The match between learning and work is not that concrete, for anyone who gets a major in philosophy or in political science, how will their learning directly apply? That often, remains to be seen. And then as a result, there's a certain amount of uncertainty about your financial future and stability. What are you going to do? Where are you going to be? What is your path going to look like? This creates a lot of uncertainty and worry, and this is why often those are the departments where students are more anxious. And presumably you are here because you have asked yourself that very question, right? What am I going to do with this degree? Because it's not obvious. The business college doesn't have to answer this question in this way. Now, they think they don't have to. I believe they actually should. Engineering the same. They believe they don't have to answer the question, what are you going to do with your degree? Because all their students feel confident that they will just be engineers. It's that easy. But in 20 years from now, engineering will look a whole lot different than their training looks like right now. And what business means or doesn't mean and changes dramatically depending on different contexts, say the online business world, e-commerce, etc. So they're not as certain in their futures as they believe. But certainly there's no anxiety amongst the student body in the same way that it exists in humanities and social sciences. So are you freaked out now a little bit more? Because I seem to confirm all your worries. You don't have to. So don't be. Your discipline may not put you on a well-marked highway to prosperity and stability with big signs saying, here, go here, walk this line. You don't have that. But there's an upshot to this, and I'm really going to push the metaphor of path to the breaking point, okay, of what's sufferable. You're embarking on career paths that are less traveled, and as a result, less trampled. They are less marked. They are more windy, meaning no direct shortcut. They tend to, as a result, also be more colorful and, I would say, far more rewarding. And over your lifespan, certainly, your earnings will actually be competitive. Statistically, that is true. So statistically, humanities and social science graduates do not fare poorly in lifetime earnings. The initial earnings tend to not be that high. But in terms of over the course of their lifespan, they actually do quite well. Now, why is this? Take a step back before we get to answer this. You all are here as graduate students, and you got your BA, and you probably had first thought, man, I have a BA, and that's good. That's a college degree. And there's a lot of reason to be proud of having a college degree. But what does it really mean to have a bachelor's? A bachelor is often a frequent hiring qualification, meaning it's the baseline for most career paths. It doesn't do all that much in and of itself, but it's often the thing that allows you to even get into the door. It's proof of socialization and some form of professional grooming. So most recruiters want someone with a college degree because they have some expectation that someone with a college degree is going to know how to conduct themselves in a professional setting, knows how to converse and talk in a professional adult manner, and do the same in writing, and be able to follow some instructions, and is willing and able to learn things. In reality, very few employers, and that includes the business world and the engineering world, don't turn to their BA or BS students and expect them to come with a certain skill set that can easily directly be applied. Most of the time, you still learn what you have to do on the job. So the BA in and of itself is not all that important in terms of the skills that or the knowledge that you bring to it. It's not that much, because in the end, it's a generalist's degree. You are a generalist. A BS in biology does not make you a research biologist. You're not going to start curing cancer with that. A BS in engineering does not get you a job designing bridges. Bridges are way too important to be left to students with an undergraduate degree. In the same way, a history BA will not become a curator at the Smithsonian. It doesn't quite work that way. So that's what it means to be a generalist. Now you are here, of course, because you want to get the MA. So if the college doesn't make you all that special because you're one of, as you can see here in this sea of graduates, does maybe the MA make you a little more special? Yes. It is a professional degree, so you will be a professional historian or a professional psychologist, a professional political scientist. And that means you have increased advancement opportunities. It means you can go further down the line or higher up the ladder. It suggests a certain mastery of a body of knowledge. So an MA in history is supposed to know a certain amount of things. An MA in political science is supposed to have certain competencies that lets them navigate, say, the halls of Congress and the work of any state legislature. It also suggests that you are capable of deepening your knowledge, meaning that you are able to research independently and build new knowledge. That's really a crucial new quality, your ability to build new knowledge. It suggests that there's a competency in the methodology, so that if you have a master's degree in psychology, that you know the methods that psychologists employ, that historians employ, if you have an MA in history, and that you know how these disciplines work, and that you can follow that pattern, more or less. Most importantly, though, it suggests that you have mastered a particular way of thinking. A way of thinking, hermeneutics is the fancy word for that. So you know how to think like an historian. You know how to think as a political scientist, criminologist, psychologist. So knowing how to think in a particular way, that ensures that you can build new skills after graduation, form new bodies of knowledge after graduation, develop new competencies after graduation, grow on your career path as a result. So in the end, what all this means is that you are building the tools for further growth after you have finished with your MA. That's really what your MA is giving you. It is not a fixed package that you put under your arm and walk away with and then just apply. I'm thinking of Minecraft here. I'm not sure that works as a metaphor. You have your tool and you use it. It doesn't work that way. The BA doesn't work that way. The MA doesn't work that way either. But it allows you to develop things afterwards. Now, all this, of course, is laid out in the UPS graduate student learning goals, which I'm sure you have been brooding over many times. I know you haven't. Chances are you've never heard or seen these before. But this is what we as the university say you have to learn. This is the goal that we have for you. And what I'm going to do now, not too long, I'm going to put you in random groups where I would like you to discuss, look at these goals that we have for you and that you are supposedly having for yourself, and discuss, are you making progress on these? Are you doing this? And where do you feel surprised, thinking that you didn't think that you were supposed to develop this at all? Okay, so I'm going to let you for about three minutes or 4 minutes do this in your groups. Let me just find the right button here. Okay, we have 15 people. So I'm going to put this in, let's say, I'm going to put this into 3 groups. All right. And I'm going to let you, let's say 4 to 5 people. I'm going to let you do this for about 5 minutes. All right. So look at these goals and then discuss how are you doing with this. All right. I'll call you back soon. All right. Okay. Good to see you all back. So generally, do you feel that you are actually advancing on these learning goals for yourself? Is that actually happening in your programs? Happy
Yes.
to hear from anybody. Yes? Good.
I do think that number 5 and 6 are somewhat a little bit more difficult to tackle, I think, because it's actually applying the skills that you're learning to your community or like in person, like an actual experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you think that you haven't really had a chance to do that actually, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Do you think that if you were in the community, say you're a history graduate student, as a teacher or at a small local museum or in an oral history project, or say working as a company historian, do you think you could apply your methods and technologies then and do that?
Yeah, I think it's just about getting that experience.
You're certainly right that actually giving graduate students the off-campus opportunity to learn in the community, with the community, not all programs are equally proficient at that. Some need to be so more than others, but it's certainly a desirable activity. That can sometimes that can take all sorts of different forms. Internships, of course, are a way to do this. Study abroad programs, which graduate students do less than undergrads, are also ways of doing this. Any other feedback here from the group? Do you feel your programs are advancing you on those lines? Not everybody at once. Okay. All right. We'll do it quietly then. I assume that you all agree with me that it's happening. I have no other way of knowing, so I have to. Oh, 2 people raised their hands. I'm so sorry. There I am, being all cynical about participation, but there are 2 hands up. Elizabeth and then Dominic. Go ahead, please. Thank you. Elizabeth first.
I'm in the MPA program, and at first I thought
Can you spell that out for everybody?
public administration.
Okay. Yes.
And when I started the program, I didn't have any experience in the public administration field, and I kind of thought I would learn like a little bit more hands-on stuff, but it's in the program it's kind of more on the theoretical side.
Huh.
But I've started an internship, and I feel like maybe I didn't learn like exactly how to do the work, but I think it does tie back into the theoretical stuff. So at first I thought like what I was learning wouldn't really apply to the job, but I'm like the more I'm progressing, I think it does tie back. So I think the program and like my internship is going pretty well hand in hand. So I feel like it's
I
been
would
helpful.
say, yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut in there, and yet I did. But public administration is really that's a curious animal in social science and humanities and social sciences, because it is a very applicable MA. There's employers who are specifically asking for this, and that is actually one of the I think one of the places where my generalizations about colleges doesn't really work, because we actually have a lot of networks where our public administration MAs actually, they know where they're going to go. But I'm glad that after some uncertainty you seem to be finding a direction there. So that's good to hear. Dominic, go ahead.
Definitely in terms of doing my master's in history, I learned more critical and analytical skills. And in terms of working as a group versus working on my own, from my personal experience, taking classes, one class with you, Dr. Jensen, I learned to work as a group instead of working on my own. And those are skills you need to have in order to function in the public workspace.
Yeah, Yeah, a group work is that's not equally strong with all faculty, not with all departments, but it's really quite vital. If you only know how to be a good student all alone with your classes and your books and your papers, and then are thrown into a working community where people are bound to work together, even if that is in the form of someone supervising someone else's writing. You know, it's good to be prepared for that. But it seems like generally you feel like this is actually happening in your MA program. You can see in these goals these three principles of knowledge, skill, and method. And knowledge specific to the discipline, historians need to know a certain set of basic principles about historical development, and when it comes to American history, you need to know some of the foundations. The same would be true for psychologists, people in public administration. The skill is really quite important in the MA, the research and the writing. And knowing how to write is not the same as knowing how to write, by which I mean every discipline writes in a different way. So for Elizabeth in public administration, there will be very clear rules and I would say, and this is not to dismiss it, formulas on how to write at the public administrative level. Philosophers write differently. Psychologists write differently. They're leaning much more on a medical scientific model, depending on where in psychology their concentrations are. Historians write differently once again. And so your writing is specific to your discipline, and that is one particular skill that you have. Research goes in a similar vein, that our history graduate students study research methods and need to be competent in those, and should be willing and able to apply this in different settings. You should be able to say the same about our criminal justice graduate students or political science graduate students, or those in psychology or public administration. Those research tools are really vital. If you feel that you are not a competent, good researcher, and I'm not saying know how to use Google, but actually work with databases, know where to go, where to find relevant materials, sources, information on generic large paywall databases like Dow Jones, Factiva, and those databases. This is the kind of ability and skill that is expected of you. And then, of course, there's the method, the way you think. Altogether, ultimately, it's about, and this sounds a little cheesy, lifelong learning. We have this as one of the guiding principles of what we as the university want to instill with all students, lifelong learning. And you think, oh, well, this sounds like well wishes at graduation, but it's actually more substantive than this. What this means is that higher education is not meant to be a pitcher that fills little classes, being the students, with knowledge and then puts them out there and then they do their work. The metaphor dies there because glasses with water don't do stuff. So, but you get my point, right? Too often we think of education as being just filled with knowledge and then just walking off into the world and dispensing it or applying it, whatever metaphor you want to use there. And that's not really how higher education is supposed to work at all. Yeah, you're supposed to know a little something, but mostly you're supposed to be able to keep learning. And this has never been more important than right now. I'm sure you all are familiar with our conversation about artificial intelligence. How much is artificial intelligence going to replace existing jobs in 5, 10, 20 years from now? Cab drivers thought their biggest challenge was the Uber, then the self-driving car will become the next headache, and none of you are planning to become cab drivers, so that's not a concern. But there's all sorts of other jobs that should cause computer scientists a lot of worry, engineers a lot of concern. A lot of other professions should worry about what artificial intelligence can do in their stead in the future. So knowing how to think and how to learn new things and keep learning new things, it's going to be the key ingredient of lifetime employment and indeed the building of a career. Even if you look at the way, for example, education has changed in, let's say, just the last 15 years. 15 years ago, very few people did anything with an LMS, a learning management system. They had their grade book on their computer. They had PowerPoint, that was the sophistication of technological tools used in the classroom. And online learning was really about distance learning via video, and by that I mean VHS. Since then, education has become an entirely different animal, and the things we do in the classroom and remotely now, it's an entirely different, it's effectively an entirely different job. This happens in virtually every field. So if you cannot learn over the lifetime, you will not build a career. You will only hold jobs, and you will only be able to hold them for a little while. So all of this means that, all of this means that you, with your H&SS degree, may need to manage your expectations about the first jobs you will have, the first entry into the careers you will have. There will not be the most high-paid positions right away, and they may at first be exploiting you. They may be exploiting you for some years. Now, Elizabeth with public administration has a better shot there at getting a well-paid position right away than, say, Art as a history graduate. And I'm only talking about probabilities. None of this is about certainties. In the end, Art may get the high-paying job right away, and Elizabeth may be wandering various halls of different career opportunities for a few years. I don't know that. I'm talking about probabilities here. So there's a high probability for H&SS MA students that they will, in the beginning, be underpaid. And in the beginning, will mostly take jobs in order to gain experience, learn more new things. But that will eventually develop into a career. Now, how does that happen, right? And this is what you're wondering, like, how am I going to turn this into a lifelong career? And I'm going to give you just 3 examples here from students, and yes, they're from my department because I know them, on account of the three different types of assets that you're getting: body of knowledge, skills, and method. So the body of knowledge is something that you would find in your favorite class. What is the class that you loved the most, where you thought, oh man, I could go on and on in this? What is your best research paper, the paper where you put your heart and soul into? Or what's an intense reading seminar or independent study where you really felt you really got a grip on this particular subject? This is really the thing that you want to own. That's the knowledge that you want to hold on to for long. Maybe it connects to a personal passion that connects to your field. So you are passionate about maybe community organizing and public administration, and therefore I'm interested in local government and how it works and how it can get stuff done more efficiently. Or in history, say for Elizabeth, it's about the history of pre-K education and how we can learn from past models and experiments, and that's a possibility. Here's a student, he graduated 6 years ago, Eric Ortega. He loved, I've told this story in many classes, and it's only because it's illustrative, not because he's the only one. He loved beer, and not in the crude sense of drinking beer, although I'm sure that was part of it too, but because he really liked the whole craft of it, the history of it, the business side of it. He wrote a paper on the emergence of independent breweries in the late 1960s and afterwards in California. Prior to that, the big breweries were the kinds that made Coors, Miller, Bud Light, and most American beers came from a handful of breweries in the Milwaukee region, and they really dominated the beer market, and the American beer had the reputation of being really crappy, really bad beer, and Europeans really sort of look down their noses at it, me included. But starting in the late 1960s, in part of the counterculture of California, there were some people who said, let's make some organic, let's make some authentic beer that is real, that is not corporate, that is not streamlined and made Wonder Bread style, acceptable for everybody and equally bland. And out of that emerged this whole craft brewery trend, which now really dominates. If you go to supermarket at Ralph's today, the beer shelf, if this is something you've been watching for decades, looks very different than it did, say, 20 years ago. The variety of beers, vastly different. And today, you get more different, a wider variety of beers in an American supermarket, I would venture to guess, than in a German one. Because the Germans, they know they have 1, 2, 3, 4 types of beers, and that's what they're sticking it, and they're not moving away from that. I can say that with some confidence. So it's a real transformation, and Eric understood this perfectly, and he started touring the state, and he was looking for a brewery that would hire him. No one was writing a job ad that said, we are looking for a beer expert who can tell us everything about our beers. No one did that, but he said, I can do that for you, and I want to contribute something. And he actually had a couple of job offers from different breweries who said, this guy is unique. There's no one quite like him. And so he first started offering beer education and beer tours of the brewery at Drake's. And then he moved up, and now he's actually moving out of Drake's brewery, and he's going to start his own brewery with 2 friends from the industry. And so he will be eventually probably be an owner of a small craft brewery. And he is not doing that because he has turned his back on history, but because he used the knowledge that he had to make himself an expert. And with an MA, you have the means to do that in your particular field of discipline. It's got to be something that you really love, of course. That makes you then a specialist, an expert. It makes you somewhat unique. It makes the market for your skills somewhat smaller, right? So Eric couldn't just go anywhere and say, hey, I'm a beer expert. The bakers would say, we don't care. Right? So he had a smaller market for his skill, but he had a market that really appreciated it. So if your particular passion for knowledge, for a particular body of knowledge is of that type where you can say, you know what, yeah, I am primarily interested in the difference between the post-traumatic stress disorder of Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans, let's say, in a particular field in psychology, say. And that's where I really, really concentrate the building of my knowledge. There will be places that are particularly interested in you in memory care industry, in the memory care field, for instance. But you have to have that body of knowledge and that particular passion to invest in that. So that is one example. Another example for a body of knowledge would be my former student Raymond, who was a social justice fighter. He was concerned about issues of racial and ethnic inequality, gender equity issues, and that's what drove his entire study of history. And so he really became well-versed in talking about inequity, inequality, and how to address and make changes there. And he found a job eventually for a fundraising and consulting firm that helped nonprofits build resources to enhance their installations and educational tools and social justice projects and so forth. For an example, for research, for instance, here, we have my former student, Nicole Roten. She graduated back in 2009. And she was a returning student. She had spent some years working as a personal assistant for an author, but really sort of got burned out by the job. and then went into the history MA. And she wrote a thesis on World War I conscientious objectors that refused to be drafted. And there was a job opening with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. POW stands for Prisoners of War, MIA, Missing in Action. And they were looking for a public historian. And she applied, and she really thought it was a long shot because she had written about conscientious objectors, and she had written with some sympathy and affection for these objectors. And to her surprise, at this very grim time in the job market in 2009, it was the Great Recession, she got this job. It eventually got her to the field office in Hawaii, and she's now spending a lot of time in Papua New Guinea, getting about as close to the Indiana Jones version of historian as you could possibly be. So they're getting brought into particular territories where there is a suspected crash site of a World War II plane, and thousands of World War II planes crashed in New Guinea because of poor communication and orientation. And then they still sometimes have to hike days to get to the particular location of that crash site. Then study the crash site, often negotiate with local communities who tend to make these sites their own, and whatever body is found there, often they incorporate them as their own ancestors. And so there's a lot of new skills expected of her, even though she has these research skills that got her to this, the ability to research the sites where these planes crashed. There's a lot of new things that she has to learn in the process. And here you can see her searching for the bones of at a suspected crash site, at a crash site, with trying to find the body of a World War II pilot. It doesn't always get this exciting. I have to say, I'm myself a little bit jealous of this kind of work. It's not really good for family because she travels about 9 months out of the year. So it's not for everybody, but she gets great pay and has tons of stories to tell. For others, it's the skills with database work, the mining of digital and physical archives. Can I send you to the state archives and have you deliver to me the legislative history of a particular act in the state of California? That's a research skill that would be desirable in companies having to deal with regulation, for instance, or political offices that are looking for legislative histories. Do you know where to find help if you need experts? Can you access a network of experts because you are familiar with the field? That's also important. Do you know how to conduct surveys? Or can you quickly get a grasp of your field's literature on a particular challenge or a particular issue? Those are the research skills that are expected and wanted from an MA student. Then finally, of course, the question of method. How do you think? And I wasn't going to bring in another history student here, for example, but it's the question about, can you talk, for instance, it's about the ability to talk about, say, climate change, the future of democracy, the importance of infrastructure, or whatever other issue you can think of as a, say, sociologist, a philosopher, a geographer, a historian, or a whatever your MA program may be. Do you know how to talk about that particular issue in the language and with the questions and methods of your field, rather than generically as the, say, proverbial common man and woman on the street would do? So you need to ask yourself this: do you know how to talk like an historian about climate change, like a sociologist, like a philosopher? What are the things that your discipline, that you are specifically bringing to the table here? And it's important that you become, in a positive way, self-conscious about your particular method, because eventually someone will ask you, and this is a question an H&SS student is more likely to have to answer than other students: why should we hire an historian? someone from the business college will not be asked, why should we hire someone with a business degree? Now, I will tell you that this is a question that should be asked, because I have yet to see the value of business as higher education. I will stand by that. It compares poorly, in my view, and I may be biased here, to virtually any other college. But they don't have to answer that question. Why should we hire someone with a business degree? But they will ask, why should we hire a sociology MA? Why should we hire a political science MA, a history MA? And you need to know your answer to that. So the sociologist might answer, because I know how to abstract complicated social structures and phenomena and make them operational in a way that allows us to find answers to complicated problems. This may not be the best answer to give. I'm not a sociologist, and I just pulled this out of my hat. But you can think about this independently on your own terms. As an historian, you might answer, because I know how to understand context over time and identify the roots of problems and tell stories of how problems emerge and how they can be solved. Right? The storyline, the story arc is what the historian can do. So you all have your particular thinking skills that you need to learn how to articulate and promote as your particular asset. You have more than soft skills. Other colleges will say, oh, H&SS, this is where the soft skills are, learning how to write and how to communicate. But you're better than that. You're not just a good writer. You are a good writer in sociology. You know how to write like a sociologist, or you know how to write like a geographer, or how to visualize like a geographer. No one else can do it that way. You can. It's not something that all humanities and social sciences graduates will do in the same way. This is where we are undervalued outside our college, and where we rarely embrace and affirmatively describe our own skills. So if you want to give yourself one piece of homework, it is that, to write out, how do I think differently? Or if you want to be more specific about it, how would I answer any of these questions that are specific to my discipline? Or to give it put it in another way, if someone were to ask me, why should I hire a sociologist? Or why should I hire a geographer or an historian? Think about what answer you want to give. And it should be an answer that is unique to your discipline. It shouldn't be about you as a person, or about you having an MA generally, or about you just being more highly educated. That's all too vague. You need to know how to make the case for your particular discipline. And that means thinking about the way your discipline works and your learning goals. We talked about that earlier. Your writing and speaking skills, we already talked about it. But there's something we have in common across all disciplines, to be sure: the ability to summarize, to abstract, to distill efficiently and effectively for easy processing or easier processing, without misunderstanding the subtleties of an argument, explaining the topic to a novice, not just to a fellow expert, not just speaking to other sociologists or other historians. And then better still, talking about a topic that can excite a novice. You know, are you the geographer who can talk to other geographers? Well, that's good. Are you a geographer who can explain geography to others? That's better. Are you a geographer that get people excited about geography and makes them think, yeah, and we ought to have a geographer in here? That's the selling point for you, right? If you can go and recommend yourself to a company that, say, works in GPS technology. Geography is clearly a field that should be of concern and interest to them. You know, get them excited about why they really need a geographer again, and not just a mathematician. you ought to also begin your lifelong learning now. So prepare now for a life of constantly developing new competencies and interests. That means you first identify your interest, right? This may be the hardest of them all, to think about, what do I really care about? Where do I want to be? Are you passionate about politics? Where in politics do you want to work? If you don't have much faith that you can make a difference, say on the Hill or in Sacramento, is it in non-governmental organization or nonprofits? Nonprofits, by the way, make no profit, but they do pay. So it's not volunteer work that you're looking for there. Maybe your passions are similar to that beer. It's a hobby, I don't know, bicycling, but they too might want a bicycle historian. I don't know quite how to parlay this now for sociology, but think how you can connect your discipline to your passion. Engage then beyond the curriculum. So rather than just take your classes, look where else are the opportunities. Internships are a clear path towards that. Study abroad are also good. Part-time jobs. Find jobs that may not pay so well, but that maybe open a door for you, or give you an opportunity to learn something that was really useful for your particular interest. You might even want to volunteer. That's a hard sell, I have to concede. I am trying to think whether I ever volunteered, other than my mandatory voluntary service, instead of the military, the draft, which I resisted in Germany. I don't know that I ever volunteered anything. So that's, I don't speak from a high horse here. It's a tough thing to do, but it can be extremely valuable. Student organizations. Are there students on campus with similar interests that you can meet via these student organizations? Have you researched your job market? Have you ever tried to find out who hires in this field? Where is this work even desired? Whatever work it is, there's always a good chance that there's such a job in the federal government. I say this on the side. There's hardly any job, there's hardly a job that is not done somewhere in the federal government. So that is always a your jobs.gov, usajobs.gov is a good place to start. That's federal jobs. Voice your talent. That's what I said earlier. Your degree does not speak for itself. You can't just stand there proudly saying, well, I have a geography MA, and then be done with this. You have to articulate why this is an asset. And that's the biggest hurdle for you to take. Start building connections if you know where you might want to work one day. Ultimately, also start looking for the opportunities or the resources that campus has to offer. I'm venturing a guess here that a few of you have actually turned to the Career Center on campus and seen what they have to offer you. And finally, then, the general summary of this, you need to build this from the ground up. You need to expect this career path to be not a straight shot towards some miracle solution, but the building of your own, and this sounds a little Disney now, but it's true, to building your own story. And this is why I began with my own vita, because I came to my work through all sorts of, errand ways. It took me 5 years to even get to college. So, but that's not a problem unless you are depending on other people's money and are being a burden on them. Don't feel that you need to have your career decided by the time you're 24 or 25 or 27. I found my final career by the time I was 33. And that still meant at that point that I would be working for 32 years in that career. The 32 years in one career, that's a long time. So To panic now and think that you need to find the one job that gets you all the way to your retirement is unrealistic and I think undesirable. All right, so we're a little over time already, but I don't mind going on for a little longer. If you have any questions,